The mail-order bride never arrived until the cowboy found her struggling to stay alive. Jace Callahan stood on the porch of his small wooden house, squinting at the dusty horizon. The twin suns of the planet Hadara were dipping low, casting long shadows across the dry, rocky terrain. The wind blew faintly, carrying tiny grains of red dust that made him cough. It had been 2 weeks past the day his mail-order bride was supposed to arrive. 2 weeks of waiting, 2 weeks of wondering, 2 weeks of thinking every possible scenario, none of them good. Jace had moved to Hadara 5 years ago, leaving behind the crowded cities of Earth for the quiet life of a frontier colony. He had thought life on Hadara would be simple: manage the small ranch he had inherited, tend to the few animals that could survive the harsh climate, and maybe, someday, find companionship. That companionship had seemed like a dream until he had written to the interstellar mail-order service and found Leora. From the letters she had sent, she seemed clever, resourceful, and unafraid of adventure. The thought of her kept him company during lonely nights. But now, as the horizon glowed orange and pink, Jace felt a tight knot of worry twist in his stomach. The transport ship she was supposed to arrive on had never been seen, and no communication had come through. The colony's small communications hub confirmed only that the transport had vanished somewhere between Hadara's spaceport and his ranch. That was all. He sighed, running a hand over his unshaven jaw. "She'd better be okay," he muttered to himself. "If not, I don't even want to think about it." Jace knew he could not wait any longer. He had spent weeks checking every nearby canyon and plateau for signs of the ship or survivors. Each day had ended with nothing but silence. Still, something in him refused to give up hope. Humans had a way of surviving the impossible, and Jace had a feeling that Leora would be no exception. He grabbed his wide-brimmed hat and a small pack filled with supplies: water, rations, a toolkit, a solar blanket, and a handheld scanner. The scanner was crude but effective. It could detect weak life signs from a few kilometers away. It wasn't much, but in the emptiness of Hadara, it was enough to make a difference. Mounting his hoverbike, he kicked it into gear, the engine humming as it lifted him above the jagged terrain. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh sort of way: red rock formations, twisted trees adapted to survive with minimal water, and distant geysers that erupted like small fountains. But beauty did not soothe Jace's mind. Worry had taken root deep inside him. As he rode, he replayed the letters he had received from Leora. She had written of her excitement, her love for adventure, and her eagerness to see the frontier life. She had described herself as practical, willing to work hard, and ready to embrace whatever challenges the planet might throw her way. Jace had admired her courage, and now he hoped that courage would be enough to keep her alive. Hours passed as he scanned canyon after canyon, plateau after plateau. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of purple and deep red. His legs were tired, his mouth dry, and his eyes stung from the dust. Still, he did not give up. Humans were survivors, he reminded himself. He had survived storms, accidents, and the isolation of this planet. Surely she could survive too. Then, as he crested a ridge overlooking a narrow canyon, the scanner beeped. A weak, irregular signal pulsed in a pattern too faint to be mistaken. Jace's heart jumped. He slowed the hoverbike and peered down into the shadows. There, half covered by fallen rocks and dust, was a small figure. "Leora," he called, his voice cracking slightly. The figure stirred, a weak hand reaching out. Jace," her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the wind. Jace dropped the hoverbike and ran down the rocky slope, careful not to slip. He reached her side and knelt. She was dirty, her clothes torn, and she shivered from exhaustion and cold. But her eyes were bright with recognition and relief. I thought I'd never see anyone," she whispered. "You're okay now," Jace said gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I've got you. We'll get you back to the ranch." It wasn't easy. Leora could walk only a few steps before stumbling. Jace supported her, using his jacket as a sling to carry some of her weight. She told him the story of what had happened. The transport ship had encountered a minor meteor storm during its descent. She had been thrown from the landing module, which had crashed in the canyon. Alone, she had struggled for days, surviving on emergency rations and the little water she could find. Her resourcefulness had kept her alive, but it had not been enough to get her out of the canyon. "You survived all that alone?" Jace asked, amazed. Leora nodded faintly. "I had to. I knew someone would come eventually. I just didn't know if anyone could find me." Jace smiled, a mixture of relief and admiration washing over him. Humans could endure so much, he thought. They had the ability to face impossible odds and still keep hope alive. He helped her to the hoverbike, securing her carefully in front of him. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but not uncomfortable. Leora rested against him, eyes half closed, while Jace focused on the winding canyon paths. He pointed out small details along the way, patches of edible plants, hidden springs, and safe routes. She listened intently, absorbing every piece of information. He realized she was not just surviving, she was learning, adapting, already thinking about how she could thrive in this harsh land. By the time they reached the ranch, night had fallen. The twin moons cast a soft glow over the small homestead. Jace led Leora inside, offering her a warm blanket, food, and water. She accepted everything with quiet gratitude, her strength slowly returning with each sip and bite. They sat together in the kitchen, the silence broken only by the occasional clink of utensils and the soft hum of the heater. Neither spoke for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Leora looked up, meeting Jace's eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for coming. For not giving up on me." "You don't have to thank me," Jace replied. "Humans, we look out for each other. That's what we do." For the first time in weeks, a sense of peace settled over them. The dangers of Hadara were far from over, and their challenges had only just begun. But in that moment, Jace realized something important. Humans could survive anything, and together they could thrive anywhere. Outside, the wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the promise of a new day. And for the first time, Jace felt a spark of hope. Hope that not only had Leora arrived, but that together they could face whatever the frontier had in store. The morning sun rose slowly over the red plains of Hadara, spilling golden light across the small ranch. The wind carried a chill, a reminder that even in this alien world, the frontier demanded respect. Jace Callahan moved carefully around the yard, checking on his small herd of hardy sheep. They were safe, but he knew survival on Hadara was never guaranteed. He paused as he heard a soft cough from the porch. Leora was sitting there, wrapped in a warm blanket, a mug of steaming water held in both hands. Her face looked pale, but her eyes sparkled with determination. She had survived days alone in a canyon, and now she faced the challenge of living on a planet that tested every part of her body and mind. "Feeling stronger?" Jace asked, setting down a basket of fresh fruits he had grown in the small greenhouse. Leora nodded. "A little. My legs still hurt, but I think I can walk more today." Jace smiled. "Good. We have a lot to do if you want to make it here. Life on Hadara isn't easy, but it's worth it." The first step was simple: get Leora fully recovered. She needed food, water, and rest, but also training to move through the rough terrain safely. Jace had always believed that humans could adapt to anything if they had the right tools and mindset. Leora would prove that again. He led her to the greenhouse, where small plants thrived under artificial lights. The colony's resources were limited, so every plant counted. Jace handed Leora a small spade. "We'll start with something simple. Water these plants carefully and I'll show you how to check the soil and light." Leora followed his instructions, careful and precise. She seemed naturally capable, her hands steady even after days of hardship. Jace watched her, impressed by her resilience. Humans were remarkable, he thought. Even after facing near death, they could focus, adapt, and keep moving forward. After tending to the plants, they moved outside. The ranch was small, but it had everything they needed to survive: a water purifier, a small workshop, and a few animals that could tolerate Hadara's climate. Jace decided it was time for Leora to learn how to use the tools she might need. He handed her a multi-tool, showing her how to fix small leaks in the water system and how to check the solar panels on the roof. Leora listened carefully, absorbing every word. "It's not like Earth," she said finally, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Not at all," Jace said with a grin. "But humans make it work. We always find a way." Leora smiled faintly, but her eyes held worry. "What if something happens again? What if a storm hits or I get lost?" Jace placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we deal with it. Together, humans survive because we don't panic. We think, we plan, and we help each other." It wasn't long before the first challenge arrived. A low rumble shook the ground. Dust rose from the far side of the ranch and the wind shifted sharply. Jace squinted toward the horizon. A dust storm was moving in faster than usual, unpredictable even for Hadara. "Inside," he called. Leora followed quickly as Jace secured the greenhouse and sheltered the animals. The wind picked up, whistling around the small buildings, shaking doors and rattling the metal roof. Leora felt her heart race, but Jace's calm presence reassured her. "This is part of life here," Jace said over the roar of the wind. "The storm is strong, but we can survive it if we stay smart." They spent hours inside, monitoring the storm through reinforced windows. Jace explained how to read wind patterns, estimate the storm's movement, and prepare for the worst. Leora listened and learned, her fear slowly replaced by focus. She realized that humans had an instinct not just to survive, but to understand their environment and use knowledge as a shield. When the storm passed, the ranch was coated in a thin layer of red dust. Leora stepped outside, her boots crunching against the hardened soil. She looked at the landscape with new eyes. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Jace nodded. "Yes, but also dangerous. Every part of this land teaches a lesson. Humans learn, adapt, and keep moving forward. That's why we survive." Over the next few days, Jace and Leora settled into a routine. She helped with the animals, repaired fences, and learned to cook with the limited ingredients available. She discovered small joys in the routine: the taste of fresh fruit from the greenhouse, the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the quiet satisfaction of completing tasks that seemed impossible at first. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Leora and Jace sat outside. The sky was dark but alive with stars, far brighter than anything she had ever seen on Earth. She sighed, leaning back on her hands. "Jace," she said, "I didn't think I could survive on a planet like this, but now I think I can. You make me feel like humans can handle anything." Jace smiled. "We can, and not just survive, we can thrive. Humans are clever, strong, and stubborn in a good way. That's why we keep going, no matter what." Their conversation was interrupted by a faint beep from the handheld scanner. Leora tilted her head, curious. Jace picked it up and frowned. A weak, irregular signal appeared on the screen not far from the ranch. "Could be another survivor or a broken piece of equipment," Jace said. "Either way, we should check it out." Leora's eyes lit up. "I can come. I want to help." Jace nodded. "Good, you've already learned a lot about surviving here. But remember, the key is calm thinking, not rushing. We assess, plan, and then act." They prepared a small pack, filling it with water, rations, and tools. Jace mounted the hoverbike with Leora in front, gripping him for balance. The ride to the signal was slow and careful, the rocky terrain making navigation tricky. When they arrived, they found the source of the signal: a small, overturned transport drone, partially buried in a shallow ravine. It was damaged, but some of its circuitry was still functional. Leora knelt beside it, inspecting the wires and panels. "Maybe we can fix it," she said thoughtfully. Jace raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to try?" She nodded eagerly. "I learned a lot from you already. I can do this." For hours, they worked together, combining Jace's practical experience with Leora's intelligence and curiosity. She suggested rerouting power through the secondary circuit, while Jace reinforced the damaged frame with spare parts. Slowly, the drone began to whir, lights flickering to life. "It's working!" Leora exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. Jace laughed. "Told you humans can handle anything." The drone sent a weak message to the colony, reporting its location and condition. Jace and Leora watched as a distant ship acknowledged the signal. The realization hit them both. Their teamwork had not only saved the drone, but also potentially helped prevent future accidents. As they headed back to the ranch, Leora felt a deep sense of pride. She had survived a crash, learned to live on a harsh planet, and now contributed to a larger mission. The fear and uncertainty of the first days were replaced by confidence. Back at the ranch, they sat under the stars again, exhausted but happy. Jace poured them both warm drinks and handed Leora a piece of fruit. "You're doing more than surviving," he said softly. "You're thriving. That's what humans do. We adapt, we learn, and we grow stronger." Leora smiled, a new determination in her eyes. "Then I'll keep learning. I want to be ready for whatever Hadara throws at me." And for the first time, she truly believed she could. Humans, she realized, were not just survivors. They were innovators, problem solvers, and helpers. They could face impossible odds and find a way forward. And with Jace by her side, she knew she could face anything this planet had in store. The twin moons glowed over the ranch, casting long shadows across the red plains. The wind whispered softly, a reminder that life on Hadara was never simple. But with courage, intelligence, and human determination, it could be extraordinary. The morning on Hadara dawned cool and quiet, with the twin suns rising slowly over the jagged horizon. Jace Callahan moved through the ranch as he always did, checking the animals, inspecting the water purifier, and making sure the small greenhouse plants were healthy. Leora followed, her steps steady now, no longer fragile from exhaustion. She had recovered enough to move confidently, and every day brought new lessons about surviving on this harsh planet. "You've learned a lot in just a few days," Jace said, watching her adjust the water pipes with precise movements. "I've had a great teacher," Leora replied with a smile. "You make it seem possible. I didn't think I could do half of this when I first arrived." Jace grinned. "Humans can do more than they think. That's what makes us strong." But their quiet morning was interrupted by the faint hum of the communications device in Jace's workshop. He frowned and went to check. Leora followed, curious. The small screen flickered with static, then displayed a strange reading, a weak energy field pulsing rhythmically coming from a nearby plateau. "Could be another problem," Jace said, rubbing his chin. "Could be a malfunction in one of the colony's old transmitters. Or it could be something else." "Something else?" Leora asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Something unexpected," Jace said. "Either way, we need to check it out." They prepared for the journey, taking water, rations, and the repair tools that had proven useful before. Leora carried a small kit of her own, neatly packed with everything she had learned to use: multi-tools, wires, and compact solar panels. Jace watched her carefully, proud of how quickly she had adapted to the realities of frontier life. Humans, he thought, were remarkable when they combined brains, skill, and courage. The ride to the plateau was challenging. The rocky terrain required careful navigation, and the hoverbike bounced and jolted over uneven ground. Leora held tight, her eyes scanning the horizon. She noticed subtle changes in the landscape, patterns in the rocks, marks of erosion, and small patches where water might collect. She had learned to read the land quickly, a skill that could save lives on Hadara. When they reached the plateau, they found the source of the signal: a small, abandoned energy unit left behind from earlier expeditions. But it was not entirely broken. Its power core flickered weakly, sending out irregular pulses that caused the communication device to spike. "This could be fixed," Leora said after a careful inspection. Jace nodded. "Let's try, but we have to be smart about it. The energy readings are unstable. If we connect it wrong, it could short-circuit." Working together, they studied the unit. Leora suggested rerouting energy from a secondary cell, while Jace stabilized the frame with metal supports from his toolkit. Hours passed, filled with trial and error. Sparks flew occasionally, but there was no danger, just a demonstration of human patience and problem-solving under pressure. "Try it now," Leora said, tightening the final connection. The unit hummed to life, more steadily this time. A small light blinked in rhythm with the pulsing signal. Jace and Leora shared a brief smile of triumph. They had fixed it. "This will help the colony," Jace said. "It's sending a weak report back to the main station. Maybe they'll pick up the readings and adjust the other transmitters." Leora nodded, proud of their accomplishment. "We didn't just survive," she said. "We made something work. We helped." "Exactly," Jace replied. "Humans don't just endure, we think, adapt, and improve. That's why we thrive, even in places like Hadera." Their celebration was short-lived, however. The sky darkened suddenly and a low rumble rolled across the plateau. Leora looked up, alarmed. Jace's eyes narrowed. "Electro-storm," he said. "We've got about 10 minutes before it reaches us." Electro-storms were dangerous but not deadly if handled correctly. They disrupted electrical systems, scattered communications, and could cause minor equipment damage. But humans were clever. They had tools, planning, and instincts to survive. Jace and Leora worked quickly. They disconnected the energy unit, shielding it with makeshift panels. Leora helped secure the hoverbike, placing it behind a rock outcrop to avoid the strongest gusts. Dust and small sparks filled the air as the storm approached, but neither panicked. Leora's hands shook slightly as she adjusted a protective metal sheet over the energy unit. "It's scary," she admitted. Jace placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Scary is fine. Fear is fine. But don't let it stop you. Humans survive by staying calm, thinking clearly, and working together." The storm hit. Lightning-like arcs danced across the sky, illuminating the plateau in brief flashes. The wind howled, lifting small rocks and dust into the air. Leora felt the vibration through her feet, but she kept her focus, remembering every lesson Jace had taught her. She worked steadily, shielding the equipment and keeping the hoverbike safe. Hours later, the storm passed as suddenly as it had arrived. The plateau was coated in red dust, but the energy unit was intact. The hoverbike was unharmed. Leora breathed deeply, relief flooding through her. "We did it," she said, smiling at Jace. "We made it through." Jace nodded, proud. "Humans don't just survive storms like this. We learn from them. We prepare for the next one. That's why we last." The return ride to the ranch was quiet but thoughtful. Leora gazed at the landscape, now transformed by the storm. She noticed new water channels forming in the ground, small plants bent but still standing, and rocks shifted into fresh patterns. Life on Hadera, she realized, was not static. It required attention, adaptation, and creativity. Humans, she thought, were perfectly suited for it. Back at the ranch, they began to repair minor damage from the storm. Leora carried tools with a newfound confidence, demonstrating the skills she had learned. Together, they patched fences, cleaned the dust from the greenhouse panels, and reinforced the solar collectors. Every action, every decision reflected human ingenuity, the ability to use knowledge, tools, and cooperation to overcome challenges. That evening, Jace and Leora sat outside under the twin moons, drinking warm herbal tea. Leora felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had arrived on Hadera a stranger, terrified and alone. Now she was learning to thrive, not just survive. Humans, she realized, were remarkable not because of strength alone, but because of intelligence, creativity, and perseverance. "Do you ever think about why we're like this?" Leora asked, gazing at the stars. Sometimes, Jace replied. We adapt, we solve problems, we cooperate. That's what sets us apart. It's why we survive when so much else fails. It's why we explore, build, and keep moving forward. Leora nodded, feeling the truth in his words. I want to be like that. I want to help, to create, to solve. I don't want to just live on Hadera, I want to thrive here. Jace smiled. And you will. You've already shown that. Humans can do amazing things when we put our minds to it. The wind whispered softly through the rocks, carrying a quiet promise of more challenges ahead. Leora and Jace were ready. Together they would face whatever Hadara had to offer: storms, rough terrain, or unexpected problems. And together they would solve them. Because that was what humans did. They faced the impossible. They adapted. They persevered. And most importantly, they thrived. As they watched the twin moons rise high, Leora felt a surge of hope and determination. Life on Hadera was unpredictable and sometimes harsh, but she now understood something essential. Humans were meant for challenges. They could endure, learn, and even innovate under pressure. And she was ready to prove it every day alongside Jace. The plateau, now far in the distance, glowed faintly in the moonlight, a reminder of what they had accomplished. The storm had tested them, but humans had proven themselves again: clever, resilient, and unbreakable. Leora smiled, finally feeling at home on Hadera. The next morning on Hadera was unusually calm. The twin suns rose in slow arcs across the sky, warming the red plains and casting long shadows over the ranch. Birds adapted to Hadara's climate chirped softly in the distance, and small dust devils twisted lazily over the rocks. After the recent storm, everything felt renewed, yet the land still demanded attention. Jace Callahan was busy inspecting the greenhouse while Leora tended to the animals. Both moved with a rhythm born of days spent learning and adapting. Leora had grown stronger, more confident, and her understanding of the planet's harsh patterns had deepened. She could now track subtle signs of water, notice shifts in the wind, and predict minor temperature changes that could affect crops. Leora, Jace called, looking up from a patch of fragile seedlings. Can you come here for a minute? I want to show you something. Leora wiped her hands on a cloth and joined him. Jace pointed to a section of the greenhouse where a small row of plants had begun to wilt despite adequate watering. See this? Sometimes it's not water. Sometimes it's the angle of the sun, the light intensity, or even the air flow. You have to consider everything. Humans survive here not just by reacting, but by understanding. Leora nodded, crouching to inspect the plants. I see. It's like solving a puzzle. Everything affects everything else. Exactly, Jace said. And humans are excellent at solving puzzles. They spent the morning adjusting the greenhouse, creating reflective panels to direct sunlight more evenly and placing small vents to control airflow. It was slow work, but Leora found satisfaction in seeing the plants respond, their leaves turning greener and stronger. She realized that survival was only part of life on Hadera. Thriving required observation, learning, and small innovations, things humans excelled at. After lunch, Jace suggested they take a break and explore the nearby cliffs. I want you to see the landscape from a higher perspective. Sometimes, a wider view teaches more than staying on the ground. They climbed slowly, Leora pausing occasionally to catch her breath. The cliffs offered breathtaking views of valleys and plateaus that stretched as far as the eye could see. Water channels sparkled faintly in the sunlight, and the wind whispered across the rocks. It's beautiful, Leora said, her voice quiet. It feels alive. Jace nodded. It is. Hadara can be harsh, but it's full of life if you know where to look. And humans, we can see it, understand it, and work with it. Leora smiled. I'm starting to understand why you say humans thrive here. It's not just about survival. It's about paying attention, learning, and helping each other. Jace grinned. Exactly, and you're doing it already. As they explored, Leora shared stories of her life on Earth. She talked about crowded cities, school lessons, and her curiosity about planets far from home. Jace listened intently, sharing tales of his own childhood, his first attempts at farming on Hadora, and the challenges he had faced adapting to frontier life. Their conversation deepened their connection. Leora realized that humans did more than endure harsh conditions. They built relationships, shared knowledge, and inspired one another. She felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced before, and she began to understand that life on Hadora was about partnership as much as survival. As the sun dipped low in the sky, a new challenge presented itself. The communication device in Jace's workshop flickered again, showing a weak but persistent signal. The pattern was different this time, not a malfunction, but an unknown anomaly somewhere beyond the cliffs. Jace frowned. This could be another problem. Or it could be something the colony needs us to check. Either way, we should investigate. I want to go, Leora said immediately. I feel ready. I've learned a lot and I want to help. Jace considered her carefully. You are ready, but we need a plan. Humans survive here by thinking ahead, not rushing into danger. Together, they prepared for the journey. They packed water, rations, repair tools, and small instruments to monitor the anomaly. Leora double-checked everything, her organizational skills improving with each task. Jace mounted the hoverbike with Leora seated in front. They followed a winding path along the cliffs, carefully avoiding unstable rocks and steep edges. After a few hours, they arrived at the source of the signal, a small, partially buried research module. Its solar panels were damaged and the main console flickered intermittently. Leora knelt beside it, examining the panels and the exposed circuits. It's not completely broken, she said thoughtfully. I think we can fix it. Jace nodded. We can, but we have to be precise. One wrong move, and the system could fail completely. Working side by side, they repaired the module. Leora suggested rerouting energy from the backup cells, while Jace stabilized the panels with lightweight metal braces. They worked with quiet focus, carefully connecting wires, testing circuits, and making adjustments. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky glowing with the soft light of Hadora's twin moons. Finally, the console stabilized and a faint, steady signal pulsed from the module. It's working, Leora whispered, her eyes wide with satisfaction. Jace smiled. Humans always find a way. We survive by understanding, learning, and creating solutions. You did that today. The return to the ranch was quiet. Leora felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced a real challenge and solved it. She had learned to rely on her mind, her observation skills, and her ability to think calmly under pressure. And she had done it alongside Jace, discovering that humans were strongest when they worked together. Back at the ranch, they cleaned and secured the repaired module. Leora took a moment to step outside, breathing in the cool night air. She gazed at the stars, feeling a deep connection to both the planet and to the human spirit. She realized that survival was only the first step. The next step was understanding, cooperation, and creativity, traits that humans naturally possessed. Jace joined her, handing her a warm drink. You've come a long way, he said quietly. You're not just surviving, you're thinking, planning, and creating. That's what humans do best. Leora took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through her body. I understand now. It's not just about living. It's about seeing the possibilities, making choices, and helping each other. That's what makes humans strong. Jace nodded. Exactly, and you've proven it today. They sat together in silence, watching the twin moons reflect on the red plains. Leora felt a sense of calm and belonging. She had faced storms, survived alone, and learned to innovate under pressure. But now she understood the deeper lesson. Humans thrive through connection, creativity, and mutual support. The wind whispered softly through the rocks, carrying with it the quiet promise of future challenges. Leora and Jace were ready. Together, they would face whatever Hadara had to offer: unpredictable weather, difficult terrain, and unexpected problems. And together they would solve them, because humans, they realized, were remarkable, not just because of strength or endurance, but because of intelligence, collaboration, and the ability to learn from every experience. As the night deepened, Leora felt hope and determination fill her chest. Life on Hadara was demanding, but she was no longer afraid. Humans had the ability to overcome, innovate, and build connections that made survival meaningful. And with Jace by her side, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. The twin moons shone over the ranch, their light casting gentle shadows across the red plains. For the first time, Leora felt that she truly belonged here, on Hadera, and that humans, no matter how small their settlement, could achieve extraordinary things when they worked together.